going to let you in on a little secret. Everyone's favourite electrical engineer from MIT, Dilbert, he's right on the money when it comes to how engineering companies operate in the real world. So here we go. Now, if you aren't busy being micromanaged or trying to avoid the HR people or massaging some data, or trying to figure out how to pass the buck or trying to figure out how to look busy or trying to meet some ridiculous deadline you couldn't even meet if you had a DeLorean, or whether or not you're trying to do something for the 5th time because management didn't listen to you in the first place, or whether or not you're trying to design some early warning boss detection system for your cubicle, or whether you're just idling time listening to a stupid blog like this, then odds are you're working on a project that everyone knows is doomed to failure or is just going to get shit canned in the next company restructure. So I present to you my top 5 list of dead projects. Projects I've worked on that have never seen the light of day for whatever reason, but ultimately because mismanagement reigns supreme at every engineering company. It's just the way it is. Number 5 on my list, my automated functional tester. Yes, you've seen this before in a previous blog. This was designed to actually replace a 19-inch rack mount system which sat on a big mobile trolley. It was mains powered and it had 19-inch rack instruments, an Agilent and Fluke LCR meter and IR meter, and it had an industrial PC in there running Windows 3.11 and some Visual Basic software. So the project goal, it was pretty good idea. It was pretty solid. The old system cost about $30,000. This was going to cost about $5,000. The old system you had to wheel around on a trolley. It was big and heavy and cumbersome, but this thing you could fit in a suitcase and carry it around with you. And the old one had really troublesome test leads which you had to plug in, whereas this one just plugged straight into the product under test. It was a winner. So how could it go wrong? It technically wasn't that hard. I had the prototype up and running and demoed within a month or something like that, and it was on track and looking good. The first problem was the change in customer requirements. The goalpost just kept moving, woohoo, all over the place. One week they wanted it powered from an embedded industrial PC, the next they wanted it to hook up to a notebook, then they wanted high voltage testing, and then they didn't, and then they wanted this and that functionality, and then they didn't want test leads, and then they wanted test leads. It was crazy. It kept changing. Then they wanted me to investigate the feasibility of actually ditching the hardware I just developed for some off-the-shelf solution they had just found and made it with my software. And so I had to spend a month on that just investigating the damn thing. It turns out, no, it wasn't suitable. Back to the hardware. Then, of course, I got tasked onto other projects as well that sucked up all my time. So what did they do? They set me on some time and resource management course. So after 6 months of mucking around, management finally got focused and they wanted a final demo. So we did a final demo for the customers and everyone thought it was really cool, it was really great, but they didn't know if they really wanted it because they still didn't know what their needs were. Unbelievable. So what happened in the end? Well, the project just dissipated. One of my favourite words. Projects just vanish. They just dissipate into the ether. And the customer realised, well, the old solution wasn't that bad. Windows 3.11, we'll just order another 10 of those, thanks. Number 4 on my list is some production acoustic test software. I was tasked to write some new software for an existing production hardware test jig we had for measuring the acoustic performance of hydrophones, and the old system ran on Windows 3.11, 16-bit. Now, due to some internal company politics, I was forced to write it in Lab Windows CVI, which is LabVIEW's version of C for Windows, basically. And I hadn't used it before, but instead of just jumping into it and working on the project, no, they set me on some silly course first, thinking that I'd be more productive. Now, the software wasn't actually that complex, so I had a suitable demo up and running in a couple of weeks. But that's when the micromanagement took over. So every nitpicky thing I did and every nitpicky decision I made had to be overanalyzed and justified. I had to spend most of my time just doing documentation on what I had just done or what I was going to do next month instead of cutting code. It was just ridiculous. Number 3 on my list is the next generation Seismic streamer. Now, as always, it wasn't a bad idea. The company decided to invest some money into the development of a complete system product so we'd become a big player in the oil survey market. Now this project was huge. It cost close to $10 million. It spanned about 2.5 or 3 years, I think it was. And they ran it in the classic MBA textbook style, step by step. They weren't going to miss a damn thing. They were going to manage this one to perfection. So of course this project had all the highlights from your classic overmanaged project. Number 1, recruit the best and brightest people you can get and then ignore their advice. Have 10 meetings a week that achieve absolutely nothing except resolving unsolved issues from the previous meeting. Hey, hop on the meeting merry-go-round. Woohoo! Always run the project in a state of crisis. And if something's not a crisis, well, just leave it alone until it becomes one. Make sure all tasks have equal priority, no matter how trivial they are. Invent standard ways to do things, even if they're fundamentally wrong. At least you can't be accused of not following the standard. Okay, the product, it did actually make it to trial a couple of years later. But it just died in the arse because, well, it was too late and the whole landscape had changed. Oh well, what's 10 million bucks? Number 2 on my list, the Seismic telemetry system. As the previous project was slowly sliding down the hill towards oblivion, they decided to spend up big again and design our own state-of-the-art electronics telemetry system. Now previously we actually had a third-party company design and supply the telemetry electronics for the product. Well, the company didn't want to pay the royalties anymore, so they hired a bunch of smart guys and they formed a team and a Chinese wall, of course, so that we couldn't infringe any intellectual property, and we designed our own. That was a very cool state-of-the-art system. It was like up to 10,000 channels of 24-bit analog to digital conversion, all in real-time synchronous sampling across like 10 kilometers of cable, and it was E1 protocol over an ATM fiber optic network, and it had a 500-volt DC power distributed transmission system. Because we weren't being micromanaged and the hardware team were left to their own devices, we had a demo running within like a month or 2 months. It was super quick and it was state of the art. Everyone loved it, industry leading performance, and it was all fantastic and looking good. So what happened? Well, it all just dissipated again because the company figured it was probably going to be a big no-show, and well, it doesn't help when your company's bought out by a bigger company that has competing technology. So they just let it go for a while, but then they weren't really serious. It was going to be shit canned from day one. Oh well, it's not a bad way to spend a year or so in a high-tech development project. Could be worse. And number 1 on my list is a 3D underwater sonar system. This one was a biggie. It was a government contract upwards of $12 million, I think it was, and it was to develop a world-first 3D underwater sonar system. And well, it was a pretty good idea at the time. All the individual aspects of the product and of the concept had been demonstrated in ideal conditions in their own little elements. So all we had to do was put it together, right? How hard can that be? It's just a system. That's what you have systems engineers for and systems managers, right? So what do? Well, you take a ragtag bunch of developers who are constantly revolving through different parts of the organisation, and you put them together, form a team, and to develop this high-end FPGA hardware and system solution. And well, you get them to write some VHDL, which they're not very good at, and then well, you try and make the whole thing work. And then you add in some management or mismanagement, and bingo, you've got a classic project. I won't bore you with the details, but one person nailed it on the head when they said this project was a triumph of workmanship over engineering. The result? Well, it didn't quite work as expected at each milestone. So the government just kept lowering the bar of the requirements so that they couldn't be accused of funding yet another failed project. And of course it all worked out well. Everyone got a big pat on the back, and the government said, oh, that was interesting and fantastic and money well spent, but I don't think we'll fund the production of this thing. Ah, well, what's 12 million bucks or more? So next time you find yourself working on a dead-end project, don't worry about it. It's normal. It happens to everyone. So, have a laugh, have some fun, read Dilbert, watch Office Space again, and just take home your paycheck and be happy.